With this podcast, I hope to help you fine-tune your awareness, help you find positivity in your struggles, and give power to your mindfulness. This is Mindful Guidance. Emotional healing is very important, and I believe it is going to become even more important in the upcoming years. I hope to help people understand that our emotions matter. They lift us up and they bring us down. They connect us to others, and they can keep us distant. While many would say that they are not emotional and emotions are reserved for one gender or another, this is impossible, as emotions affect the physical and energy body of us all, masculine and feminine alike. It is simply how we navigate them that matters. Even the smallest awareness of where our emotions stem from and how they are affecting us can be a drastic change in our individual lives, and as things are energetically layered, how they are affecting us as a society. I often receive collective emotion messages during emotion code sessions and meditation, and I started to share them on my social media recently. I realized that this, instead, would be a nice addition to my podcast. I began to intentionally tap in and ask for messages for the collective on whatever emotion comes through, as I believe this is an important part of healing, not just as individuals, but as a collective. It is in my observation that much of what we go through as individuals is reflective of what we go through as a community, as a nation, and as a globe, and is something that can truly unify us if recognized. But instead of focusing on the negative part of the emotion in a misery loves company sort of way, like we may be used to, we can focus on how to navigate the emotions so we can understand them, move through them, and be non-judgmental when others are doing the same, or, most importantly, don't quite know how. So without further ado, this is a segment of the podcast I am calling Emotional Healing for the Collective. Hello all, my name is Michaela, and thank you for joining Emotional Healing for the Collective. This is sort of an addition to my podcast that I kind of came up with just kind of on a whim. I'm going to be kind of reading from my journal. These are things that I end up writing down either after a session with somebody when I do emotion code sessions, or when I'm in meditation. Sometimes things just sort of get, I guess, downloaded, some people would call it, or I just tap into things that are coming through that I feel like need to be written down either for me or for someone else, or a lot of times it's really for the collective. Like I'll just start writing and I recognize that this is just, it's partly for me, but it's also just for outwardly everybody, because again, it's what we go through a lot of times is a reflection of what is going on in the world around us. And, emotions are complex. So, we can be emotional, we can have these ups and downs and not even recognize that the ups and downs we're feeding off of other people. We're feeding off of just a collective in general. And I know I'm one of those people. A lot of times I feel like I'm being very emotional for no reason, but there's never no reason to be emotional, because even though it might not be your emotions, it could be just things that are going on in the world. And even if you're somebody who doesn't read the news, who doesn't, follow along with a lot of things online or on the television, it kind of doesn't matter. That can remove you a little bit, but you can still be you feel what the people are going through next to you. If you work in a public industry, you feel what those people are going through or what they're escaping from. And then also we can just kind of feel the rumbles of the collective. And I think it's important to understand that we're not all just moody, like some people can get into funks for no reason, and when people talk like that, when you're talking to yourself, like I just feel this way for no reason. There's a reason. Or if you're talking about a friend or a loved one that you're like, I don't know, they were this way one minute, and then out of nowhere, they were this way. You know, all of a sudden they had these feelings, or they changed their mind, and things are out of nowhere. And I'm not an out of nowhere believer. I don't believe that things come out of nowhere. I don't believe that things happen for no reason. I definitely think that if we allow ourselves to be more present and aware, that you'll be able to find the reason, and understand that sometimes it isn't yours. The reason isn't yours. It isn't, you know, it could be somebody else. You know, there's been many times where I feel some type of way and I cannot figure it out. And then I'll get a call from a friend who's going through something hard, or a family member. And I'm like, oh, this is why I was feeling that way. That's a very real thing in the world. So, and you know, there's a lot of turbulence happening in the world around us as a whole. So you can imagine the ebb and flow of energies that are coming through a lot of different people. And, you know, even though we're not directly in contact with specific things, you know, energies are always flowing, and we're connecting with people in so many different ways. And I think it's really important to just start understanding our emotions better, understanding how they affect us, understanding how we can release them, because they can become trapped all of the time. We all of us harbor trapped emotions within our energy bodies and also in our physical bodies. That's, you know, some of the work that I do is trapped emotion release. And some of them can be embedded for our whole lives, for many years. And some of them can be very recent. So I just think it's important that people don't dismiss the way they feel a lot of times, and just think that things are out of nowhere, or things that running mind that you have, that it just came out of nowhere. And it's like, no, it didn't. You know, you're either tapping into somebody else, or something has arisen in you that has been, quote unquote, triggered, or activated. And, you know, I just think it's important to, you know, we might not be able to deal with it in that moment, but then it becomes even more trapped, and we have to sort of allow things to resurface, and not to resurface in an unhealthy way to where things are damaging or explosive, but to allow our energies to be removed in a healthy way, whether that's through talking or movement, exercise, emotion release, energy sessions, acupuncture. I mean, there are countless modalities that you can use to help you understand how to release those energies that are that emotional energy. And so I think the reason I wanted to start this series is because there's just something about it that I tap into regularly. And again, this will happen if I'm on a session with an individual. I'll get the messages for them, but then somewhere in the background and later on when I write, the messages for the collective as well. Because if one person is experiencing a certain emotion, I can guarantee you countless others at the same time or at some point in their life are dealing with the same, because we all deal with similar emotions at different times in our lives. And there's a really good chance that somebody else is feeling the same type of emotion as you, and is trying to move through it in some way. And I don't know, I just think this is just something that I want to share with people, because I want people to know that they're not alone, that their emotions matter, that they do affect us. They affect us personally, and they affect the way we treat people. And if we understand that, then we can understand that other people, the way their emotions affect the way they treat us. Their emotions affect the way they show up in the world. It affects our energy body. It affects our aura. It affects, they affect our physical body. They can be easily transmuted into physical ailments. There's so many things that happen when our emotions are trapped and released. Like, this is an ebb and flow of energy. And I think that we need to become more aware of it so that we all can manage easier, so we can move through them easier instead of trapping them or repressing them or pushing them down or thinking they don't exist or thinking that things are just coming out of nowhere, whenever I hear that, when people talk like that, oh, she just yelled at me out of nowhere, or he just got mad at me for no reason, or they just left, or this happened, or my kid just did this out of nowhere. It's like, nothing is out of nowhere. Nothing is out of nowhere, guys. Like there is a there's an emotional explanation. I can be sure of it. So this segment is just going to be me talking about what I do is I tap in and I just ask, what emotion needs to be talked about in this moment. And that I muscle test through it the same way I do an emotion code session. And whatever emotion pops up, I sit and I allow the message to come through. I write it out, and typically it's kind of short. I can get into a long writing if I sit for a while, but typically I don't do that. I get the gist. And for this segment, I'm going to read what I wrote. A lot of it is like incredibly scribbly, so bear with me if I can't even read my own writing sometimes. But I will read what I wrote, and then I will elaborate as things come through, because it can be pretty nuanced. It can start off simple, and then all of a sudden other things come up, and I hope that it does, because I want people to see how easily we can get sort of lost in emotion, and how we can, and maybe there's a different perspective on how we look at them, not always in a negative way, but in a way that we can release them, not be attached to them, and also how we can hopefully allow them to move through us a lot more quickly than we're typically used to. So the first one that I want to read is, I actually wrote this in my journal on March 26th of 2025. And the collective emotion that came through was taken for granted. So that's the one I'm going to start with. I thought I was going to start with something different, but I just turned to this page. So it's what it is. So I'm going to start with taken for granted, and this affects the liver and gallbladder. So when I post about this, or when I talk about this, when I say it affects the liver and gallbladder, in Chinese medicine and Eastern medicine, they believe that emotions start in different organs, and that different organs can actually manifest specific emotions. And so if you are having a specific emotion, then you can do work. So this would be more like an acupuncture or energy work in some way, that you would specifically work on that organ, and it would allow you to move through that emotion. For me, the way that I've sort of learned about this and I've become understanding of it, especially working on people, is that it doesn't just stem from the organ. It affects the organ in a way that this is where it's going to end up affecting long term if you don't manage it. So for me, taken for granted affecting the liver and gallbladder, eventually if you are feeling this way, or if you have a trapped emotion that you don't realize that you're not dealing with, or that you've repressed, and you're coming from a place of feeling taken for granted, eventually you might have gallbladder issues, or you might have liver issues, or maybe you overeat fatty foods and overconsume alcohol, and because you're having these repressed feelings of feeling taken for granted that are coming out as maybe other emotions, and eventually, so you're doing this, and eventually that is going to affect that part of your body, the liver and gallbladder, because it's how we cope as well. There are a lot of things that we do when we're going through specific emotions, and I'll cover this each time, and you'll start to see the pattern and understand it of the way that we use our coping mechanisms will affect those parts of the body. So, definitely if you are somebody who is going through a specific emotion that's affecting the lungs, there's a good chance that you're a smoker, because that's a coping mechanism that you use. Or maybe you have some kind of sleep apnea or something, and that's something that's manifested in your body because you had an emotion that affects your lungs. So you'll start to see that sort of physiological component of the way it's all connected, because again, it's all energy. So that's what that means when I say it affects this part of the body. And again, if you tune in often, you'll start to see how it works. Okay, so taken for granted. And this is what just came to me and I wrote down. Feeling like you've been taken for granted can be an extremely hurtful feeling. It brings in many other emotions like anger, resentment, humiliation, rejection, and betrayal, among others. Taken for granted a lot of times is an undertone of other outward emotions. We can feel resentful, but why? We can feel bitter, but why? Feeling taken for granted can be obvious, or it can take time to realize for all involved. While some may not recognize they feel taken for granted, others may not recognize or realize that they have taken others for granted. Expectations of others' behavior, respect, love, and actions come into play. Do we feel taken for granted because our expectations of others is that of ourselves? Or is someone choosing to use us for all that we give? Are we taking others for granted because of mindlessness, of our expectations that they will never change, or feel the tug of resentment? We must become present to witness the feeling of taken for granted, erode all expectations, and release other attached emotions. Pride, ego, and mindlessness will have us dismissing the fact that we are taking others for granted and denying that others are taking us for granted. We must create presence for those that support us and take care of us, to show gratitude, for gratitude can release the hurt and pain of being and feeling taken for granted. So that is what I wrote down and sort of what came through. And I think that, the main lesson that I got from this about feeling taken for granted is, let's see, it's like, is it an expectation thing? Like, I think of the times in my life that I have felt taken for granted, and I think a lot of the time it simply came from my expectation that somebody else was going to treat me the same way I treat them. So there's that aspect of it where I am like, I am doing more for this person and they're not doing the same for me. And they're kind of taking advantage of the way that I give. And I think that can put you in a position to feel taken for granted. But you also have to sort of understand the role you're playing in that and ask yourself, am I putting my expectations into somebody that isn't going to give me what I'm giving them per se? So, there's always a moment where we have to ask ourselves what our role is in the relationship or in the business or whatever the relationship is. It's like, how are we kind of allowing people to do this in such a way because we want to feel important, and then it's one of those things too where it's like a lot of us give and give and give, and we don't even really realize we're being taken for granted at the time. And also other people don't even realize they're taking us for granted. I mean, how many people have you learned that get in, when they break up in relationships, one of the people was like, man, I really took that person for granted. Like, I didn't really realize how much they did for me and how much, I wasn't present. I wasn't witness to anything that they were really doing for me. And it wasn't just about the, maybe they paid my bills and all the physical things, but like these just emotional support and things like that. And so I think the important thing too with the taken for granted is just recognizing that later on when we feel certain emotions that come up, like if we feel resentment, we are resentful to people. Like, I've known people and talked to people where they like are so resentful of their partner for certain things. And I'm like, well, did you say anything? Did you do anything? And it's like, no, they just should have noticed. They just should have understood. It's this underlying, like it's an unspoken rule. And it's like, there's no unspoken rules. Like that's kind of I don't know if it's outdated or what, but there's no unspoken rules. Like you got to talk about it. If you're doing all of these things and later on you feel taken for granted and you're resentful of what, of this person, did we allow, our feelings to be heard, or did we just eventually you're harboring resentment. And I think that's kind of another thing that it means too, is it's like all of a sudden all these other emotions arise. like, I feel like taken for granted is something that, like, when I do emotion release on people, I release kind of these just like emotions that seem like they don't matter. But that's only because they're the layers of emotion that need to go first. And then underneath, it's like, oh, I felt taken for granted. And I didn't realize that I became resentful. I didn't realize that I, was in so much pain, because in these moments in time from however long ago, I just felt like I was being taken for granted. And I didn't realize. And so I became bitter. I became resentful because I didn't talk about those moments where I felt taken for granted. And so I think it's important to, as a person who feels taken for granted, you need to speak up right away. And if that person isn't reciprocal or doesn't understand how you feel and is going to be like, well, sorry you feel that way, then you need to question what kind of person you're dealing with. And then also, if you're a person who, later on recognizes that you took someone for granted, that somebody in your life that's not there anymore for whatever reason, and you go, wow, like I really took this person for granted. I think that's I think there's a moment of realization there of how we can walk around in complete mindlessness, with a lack of presence, and we can take those around us for granted without even realizing it, because we are just not present anymore. We are not a present society. We are very glued to like this and glued like this and overworked and everything. And so we can just completely miss out on the presence of others. So other people are trying to be present for you and you're not being present for them. And there's a huge mismatch of energies there. And so later on, when you go, wow, I really took this person for granted, again, and that can snowball into other emotions. You can feel sad, you can feel, I guess sad is really the one that comes up right now. I can't think right now, but you can feel like really bummed out or guilty. Guilt is going to be a big one. Shame and guilt and sadness that can come out. And then that's what you're going to portray out into the world, instead of just owning the fact that you took someone for granted and maybe reaching out to that person and say, hey, like, it doesn't mean you have to reconcile everything. That's not what that always means. It just means that acknowledging the times that you took someone for granted, because coming to terms with that emotion, because again, it's an underbelly emotion typically. It's typically one that we don't really speak on right away, because there's moments in time, this happens in jobs all the time. This happens in relationships where we just kind of sit quietly and hope for the best, and hope eventually if we just show up better or at our best, that those people are going to notice. Or maybe they do notice and then they take advantage of that, right? Like how many people have been in jobs where you do so well that they like, once you're gone, they're like, oh, this person did so much more than I realized. And I never gave them that acknowledgement. I never said thank you. And now, wow, I really took that person for granted. And the reason you left is probably because you felt taken for granted. So it's like, if at some point, if we could have the conversation and there can be an understanding of, I'm not upset because I'm resentful, I'm not bitter, I'm actually feeling taken for granted. And if the other person can say, you know what, I didn't recognize how much you meant to this situation, to this relationship, to this partnership, and I've been taking you for granted. And I think that can eliminate that really underbelly of an emotion that we take for granted. It's an emotion that we actually take for granted because we just don't tap into it as much, and it typically comes out as something else. So if you're in sorrow, if you're crying, if you're sad, if you're bummed, like people are like, why are you sad? And then eventually it's gonna be like, well, I feel taken for granted. And that's a heavy emotion to actually come out and speak about, because it means you actually have to talk about why. And so it's a deep-seated emotion, and because it's one that we don't talk about like right away, it's one that becomes trapped, and it can fester, and it can really cause it can cause damage to the body, to the psyche. It can, and again, when I talk about, it can end up affecting certain parts of the body. It's like, these things can manifest because we psychologically or physically try to numb those emotions that pop up, and we try to like shoo them away or even question like, well, and we actually try to be okay with it. We're like, I don't feel that taken for granted. It's fine. I'm fine. Like, whatever. That was a long time ago. It's whatever. I'll just move on. And we think we're okay with things when we're not. And that's when we start to really numb those deep emotions. And they start to come out in other ways. And so again, affecting the liver and gallbladder, this can just manifest as a physicality somewhere. And, when you go in and do something like acupuncture or Reiki or something, they can tap into like, oh, there's something going on with your liver and gallbladder. And it might just be those emotions are activating and they need to be released. So, and luckily those modalities do help in releasing those emotions. And the things that we do to numb those emotions are probably going to affect the liver and the gallbladder. And, the thing that come to mind are the substance using and the eating certain foods. And those affect the way they move through our system and can cause damage to the body. So emotion release is so important. Navigating our emotions is so important. And understanding that our emotions can be incredibly layered. There's emotions that are typically louder than others. Anger is usually one of them. Crying is one of them. Sorrow is one of them. Depression is one of them. These are typically sort of louder and really on the surface and things that we're used to. But when you start to dive underneath those emotions, you start to get into things like taken for granted and other emotions that can be a little bit rooted that we just don't deal with. So it's so important to deal with them so that we don't deal with them in an unhealthy way, like the substance using and the different choices that we may make that might be harmful to the body because we're simply just trying to mask our emotions. And there are ways to deal with things in a healthy way. And typically this comes after dealing with things in an unhealthy way. But it's never too late. It is never, ever, ever too late to start understanding your emotions and how they affect your daily life and how that because they affect you, they affect others. And this is also something, again, like as a collective, I hope that we can understand because, in doing the work that I've done over these years, one of the things that this has helped me with is compassion because I can look at somebody who's angry, somebody who's sad, somebody who is stressed out, and I can typically go, there's a lot of underlying emotions there that are stirred up and that have been poked and prodded and activated, and I hope that that person can get the help that they need to manage those emotions, to be able to, to curb the outward forces that can cause incredible damage in relationships, in business partnerships, in communities. Like it can really, emotions are a driving force in our society. People don't like to think that they are, but they very, very, very much are. And, if a lot of people could learn to manage their emotions and not make decisions based on emotion or pretend they don't have emotion. There's a lot of people out there who are like, I'm not going to make a decision. I'm not an emotional person, so I'm not going to make an emotional decision. And I'm like, yeah, you are. You 100% are. You're 100%. This is all emotion. And so just, I think, being able to tap into that as a collective can bring compassion and understanding to some. And I think it's going to be more and more important as the years go on. So I just wanted to start sharing this, and I hope this resonated with people. I hope I didn't ramble too much on this topic. I'm going to try to start organizing these a little bit better. This is just my first one. I'm testing out my new computer right now to make sure it works, making sure all the volume is doing its thing. And, this is, I just started my podcast back up. So this is something new, something fresh. Please let me know in the comments if this resonates with you, if you want to hear more of these. I'm going to hopefully do these once a week. And each emotion is going to be different. And for some people, it's going to resonate right away, and other people, it's not going to be for you, and that's totally fine. But just come back for the next one to see if it is for you, and if it might be an emotion that is stirring up inside of you or somebody else around you that could possibly use some help in navigating those emotions and having a different perspective on where that emotion might be coming from. So thank you so much for listening, you guys, and I really appreciate all that you, all my followers and people who are supportive of me. So, sorry, I just got really distracted by my neighbor. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. And please go listen to the rest of my podcast, my Mindful Guidance podcast. There's going to be a lot more coming up on that. And anyway, yeah, we'll talk soon. Let me know what you think, you guys. Have a good day. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me for Emotional Healing for the Collective on Mindful Guidance. If you are interested in learning more about the Emotion Code or would like to schedule a session, please feel free to email me at michaela@balancefitnesswellness.com. These sessions can be done over the phone or Zoom. You can also check out my website, balancefitnessandwellness.com, for all my other ongoing coaching programs like How to Win the War on Your Health and You Are Energy. If you are in need of home cleaning and cleansing due to bouts of depression, stress, or even hoarding, this is also something that I do, as it is just another form of energy healing. Please reach out for more info. Supporting my podcast is so helpful to me, so please like and subscribe on either Spotify or YouTube, and share the episodes that you think may help someone else. As always, thank you for being here. Until next time.